The evening air had cooled, bringing a crispness to the streets of the small town. The glow of streetlights painted pools of amber on the pavement as the world seemed to settle into a quiet lull. The last few customers had trickled out of the diner where Emma worked, leaving her alone to clean up before heading home. It had been a long shift, but it wasn't anything she wasn't used to. She enjoyed the simplicity of it all, the regulars who ordered the same meal, the rhythm of the diner buzzing in the background, the comfort of knowing that, for the most part, life was predictable. She wiped down the last table, letting her mind wander for a brief moment. She thought about the upcoming weekend, a rare break from the monotony, and the quiet nights she spent watching movies with her younger brother, Noah. Life wasn't perfect, but it was steady, and that was enough for her. At least, it had been until tonight. As Emma locked the front door and stepped out into the parking lot, she inhaled deeply, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. The world around her seemed peaceful, but she knew better than to take it for granted. The streets were quiet, but there was a sense of unease she couldn't shake off. She pushed the feeling aside, telling herself it was just the exhaustion from her long shift. She slid into her car, a tired but reliable vehicle, and started the engine. The hum of the engine felt comforting as she pulled out of the parking lot. Her headlights cut through the darkness as she began her drive home, the road stretching ahead in a familiar, almost comforting way. But tonight was different. As she drove along the empty road, the soft sound of the tires rolling over the asphalt was interrupted by the sudden flashing of red and blue lights in her rearview mirror. For a split second, she didn't understand what was happening. It took her a moment to realize that a police car had pulled up right behind her. The sirens wailed faintly in the distance, but they weren't close enough to be urgent. Still, the flashing lights were enough to make her pulse spike in confusion. Emma's heart raced. She wasn't sure why she felt so nervous. After all, she had done nothing wrong. Her car was in good condition, and she hadn't been speeding. But the fear crept in anyway. She checked her rearview mirror once more. The lights were still there, and soon, another police car pulled up beside it, following close. The second officer's car was even closer now, and Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. Something about the situation felt off. She turned onto a side street, hoping that maybe they were just passing through. But as she slowed down, both cars followed, their headlights now glaring at her from behind. The sudden realization hit her that they were pulling her over. She had been stopped by the police. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding as she pulled over to the side of the road. Her hands were trembling slightly as she gripped the steering wheel. What was this about? The first police officer approached her vehicle. He was tall, with short-cropped hair, his uniform neatly pressed. His face was serious, his expression unreadable. He stopped just short of her door and gave her a look that made her feel even more uneasy. "Step out of the vehicle," he said, his voice low but commanding. Emma froze. Was this really happening? Why was he asking her to step out of the car? There was no reason for this. She had done nothing wrong. "Excuse me, officer, but is there a problem?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The officer didn't respond immediately. He just kept his eyes trained on her. She had the sinking feeling that he was sizing her up, as if trying to figure something out. Emma swallowed hard, unsure of what was happening. "Please step out of the vehicle," the officer repeated, his tone unyielding. Emma hesitated for a moment, glancing around, trying to make sense of it all. There was no reason for her to be in trouble. She had always been careful. She'd never been in trouble with the law. But something in the officer's demeanor made her feel like she was about to experience something far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. She opened the door slowly, trying to stay calm, but she could feel her heart racing. She didn't know what was going on, but something didn't feel right. The officer stepped back slightly, giving her room to exit. Emma slowly got out of the car, her knees feeling weak beneath her. She didn't want to show it, but the anxiety was overwhelming. "Is there a problem?" she asked again, her voice more strained now. The officer didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced over his shoulder, as if waiting for something. That's when she noticed the other officer. He was watching her, his eyes narrowed in what seemed like suspicion, maybe even fear. Emma's heart rate spiked. What was going on? The officer who had first spoken to her turned back, his expression stiff. "Just stay calm, and we'll get this sorted out," he said, though his tone lacked any comfort. It was as if he was more interested in making sure she didn't make any sudden movements than in explaining the situation. Before Emma could say anything more, a third figure appeared from the shadows, walking with a steady pace. The new arrival was different from the others. His presence commanded attention. He wore a long coat that fluttered slightly in the breeze, and despite the night, he seemed unfazed, as if he had just stepped out of the shadows for a casual stroll. His eyes locked onto Emma immediately, and she could see the calm confidence in his gaze. This wasn't just any man. There was something extraordinary about him. "Enough," the man's voice cut through the tension like a knife. It was firm, deliberate, and powerful. The two officers turned toward him. Emma watched their reactions with growing confusion. One of them flinched, and the other seemed to freeze in place. The man in the long coat took another step forward, his boots crunching on the gravel. "You can go now," he said, his voice a quiet command that left no room for argument. The officers hesitated. For a moment, Emma could have sworn she saw fear in their eyes. They exchanged a quick glance, and then, without another word, both of them backed away and retreated to their cars. The man turned back to Emma, his eyes softening just a fraction. But there was no mistaking the aura of danger around him. "Don't worry, you're safe now," he said, his tone low and reassuring, though his words felt heavier than they should have been. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She had no idea who this man was, but she knew one thing: he was not someone to be trifled with. There was power in his words, and something about him sent a chill through her spine. Still, she found her voice. "Who are you?" He gave her a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Someone you don't want to cross." His gaze lingered on her for a moment longer before he turned and began walking away. Emma watched him go, her mind racing. What had just happened? Who was this man? And why had the officers seemed so terrified of him? She could feel the weight of the encounter pressing on her chest, the mystery of it all unfolding like a puzzle she wasn't sure she could solve. She stood there for a moment, still trying to catch her breath, when her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, her fingers trembling as she read the message. It was from her brother. "Noah, where are you? You're late." Emma's heart sank. She wasn't just late, she had just narrowly avoided something far worse. And it wasn't over yet. She could feel it in her bones. This encounter was only the beginning. Emma stood frozen, her mind struggling to catch up with what had just happened. The police cars had come and gone, leaving nothing but a faint trail of tire marks on the road. The man in the long coat had vanished into the shadows, his words lingering in her ears: "Someone you don't want to cross." She leaned against her car, her hands still trembling, trying to make sense of everything. Her breath came in shallow bursts as the cool night air wrapped around her. For a moment, the only sound she could hear was the distant hum of passing cars and her own heartbeat pounding in her chest. What the hell was that all about? Emma closed her eyes, trying to push the unsettling feeling away. This wasn't like anything she had ever experienced. The tension in the air had felt thick, almost suffocating, and she had no idea why. She had been a simple diner waitress, a nobody in the grand scheme of things. But tonight, everything had changed. The officers had acted like she was dangerous, as if she was somehow involved in something she couldn't understand. And then there was the man in the coat. Whoever he was, he had terrified those officers. She had never seen anyone command such fear before. But who was he? And why had he stepped in to help her? She shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. It wasn't just the mystery that was bothering her. It was the feeling that something much bigger was at play, something she was not prepared for. She thought about the strange way the officers had looked at her, the fear in their eyes when they saw the man. They hadn't even put up a fight when he told them to leave. It was like they had no choice but to obey him. Who was he? Emma pushed herself off the car and climbed back into the driver's seat. She wasn't going to get any answers standing here in the middle of the road, so she drove off, trying to shake the sense of dread that clung to her. The streetlights blurred as she sped down the road, the familiar path to her apartment now feeling more like a maze. She couldn't understand it, but the truth was, she was afraid of the unknown, afraid of the man in the coat, and afraid of the questions that were piling up faster than she could answer them. Her thoughts wandered to her brother Noah. He had always been her anchor, the one person who kept her grounded. He'd probably be waiting for her at home, worrying about her. She thought about the messages he had sent, his voice full of concern. Emma had never wanted to drag Noah into anything dangerous, but now, she feared that might be exactly what was happening. As she turned onto the street where her apartment was, she saw the familiar silhouette of her brother standing outside. He was leaning against the railing, his hands shoved into the pockets of his jacket. When he saw her car, his face lit up, but it quickly turned into one of concern. "Hey," Noah greeted her, his voice filled with a mix of relief and frustration. "You're late. What happened?" Emma stepped out of the car, avoiding his gaze. She didn't want to lie to him, but she didn't want to drag him into this either. "I just got caught up at the diner." "You know how it is," she said, forcing a small smile. Noah didn't buy it. His sharp eyes could see right through her. He stepped forward, his brow furrowing. "You're shaking. What's going on, Emma?" For a moment, Emma didn't know what to say. She could tell him about the police, the strange man, the way everything had just felt wrong. But she knew Noah would want answers, and she didn't have any. "Not yet. It's nothing. I'm just tired, okay," she said, trying to sound convincing. She reached into her pocket for her phone, changing the subject. "I'll explain tomorrow. I just want to sleep." Noah didn't push her. He knew when to let things go, but Emma could tell that the wheels in his mind were already turning. He would keep asking questions, and he would get to the bottom of whatever was going on. And Emma didn't know how long she could keep him in the dark. She followed him inside, her mind still racing. As they walked into the apartment, Noah made a beeline for the kitchen, grabbing a couple of cans of soda from the fridge. Emma didn't have the energy to fight him on it. She flopped down onto the couch, exhausted. Noah joined her a moment later, his eyes still scanning her face. He handed her a soda but didn't sit down right away. He seemed to be waiting for her to speak, to explain what had happened. Emma cracked open the can, but she didn't drink from it. She just stared at the couch, her thoughts consumed by the strange events of the evening. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Noah sat down next to her. He waited for a moment before speaking. "Emma, talk to me." "You're scaring me," he said quietly. She hesitated, the words caught in her throat. She wanted to tell him everything, to unburden herself, but she knew that doing so would bring more danger than he could handle. Whatever was going on, Noah didn't belong in the middle of it. He didn't deserve to be dragged into the chaos that was closing in on her. "I can't explain it yet," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But something happened tonight. Something I don't understand. The police, they pulled me over for no reason, Noah. And then, someone else showed up. A man. He scared them. And when they left, he told me I didn't want to cross him." Noah's expression shifted, confusion flooding his face. "What do you mean? Who was this guy?" Emma shook her head, her hands trembling as she set the soda down on the table. "I don't know. But he wasn't just anyone. The officers were scared of him, Noah. They didn't argue. They just left when he told them to. Like they had no choice. Noah's gaze softened as he reached out to gently take her hand. Are you sure you're okay? I don't like hearing you talk like this. It's not like you. Emma swallowed hard. She didn't know how to explain it to him, how to make him understand that everything had just changed. That her life was no longer simple, no longer the same. I don't know what's going on, she said, her voice shaky. But I'm scared, Noah. I don't know what he wants, and I don't know why the police were after me. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm just a regular person. Noah didn't respond immediately. He just sat there, his expression unreadable. He squeezed her hand, his fingers warm and reassuring. You're not just a regular person, Emma. You never were, he said quietly. Her heart skipped a beat. Emma turned to face him, her breath catching in her throat. What do you mean? Noah's gaze dropped to the floor, as if he were searching for the right words. I think it's time you know the truth, Emma. About Dad. About everything. Her pulse quickened. What was he talking about? Her father? Her mind raced, but she couldn't make sense of what he was saying. Her father had always been distant, a man who wasn't around much. But what did that have to do with what had just happened tonight? What do you know about Dad? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Noah's eyes met hers. Emma, Dad wasn't just a regular guy. He wasn't just the man who left us when we were young. He was involved in something much bigger. Something dangerous. Her mind reeled as she processed his words. What was he talking about? Emma felt as though the ground beneath her feet was shifting, as if everything she had known about her family was a lie. Noah, what are you saying? He exhaled deeply, his expression darkening. Dad was in Delta Force. He's one of the top commanders. And he's been gone because of his work. But that work, it's dangerous. And now, I think it's come back to haunt us. Emma's eyes widened in disbelief. What? Are you serious? Dad was in Delta Force? Noah nodded solemnly. I didn't want to tell you before. But after tonight, I think you need to know. The man who showed up for you, the one who scared the police. I think he's part of something bigger. Something that might have to do with Dad's past. Emma sat back, her mind spinning as the pieces started to fall into place. What had she walked into? What had her father been involved in all those years ago? And why was it all coming for her now? The apartment was eerily quiet after Noah's revelation. Emma sat on the couch, her mind a blur of disbelief and confusion. Her father, a top Delta Force commander? It felt impossible, yet Noah's words had struck her like a thunderbolt, shaking everything she had known about her family. She glanced over at Noah, who had slumped back into the armchair, his fingers drumming anxiously against the armrest. He was waiting for her reaction, his eyes watching her closely as if expecting her to either break down or lash out. Emma wasn't sure which one she was feeling. She didn't know whether she was angry, shocked, or terrified. Her head swirled with the implications of what Noah had said, but nothing made sense. How could you keep this from me? She finally whispered, her voice strained. She didn't mean to sound accusatory, but she couldn't hide the hurt she felt. Her brother had known something so crucial about their father, something that could have changed everything, and yet he'd kept it from her. Noah exhaled, the sound heavy with regret. I didn't want to burden you, Em. I didn't want to drag you into this, into Dad's mess. It's dangerous. You don't know what he's been involved in. Emma stood up suddenly, her emotions flaring. What do you mean? Dangerous? Is that why he disappeared? Is that why he left us? He just abandoned us because of his dangerous life? Her voice cracked as she spoke, and she could feel the weight of years of questions and confusion pressing down on her. Noah didn't answer immediately. He rubbed his temples, clearly struggling to find the right words. It's not that simple. Dad didn't leave us because he wanted to. He had no choice. His work, it pulled him away. And he couldn't tell us. He couldn't tell anyone. The things he did, the people he was involved with, they're still out there. Emma's heart pounded as she sank back down onto the couch. So, what? You think this man I encountered tonight has something to do with Dad's past? You think he's part of his world? Noah looked away, his gaze distant. I don't know. But I think it's more than just a coincidence. The way the cops acted, so terrified of that guy, they didn't act like he was some random stranger. They acted like they knew him. Like they were afraid of him. And when he looked at you, Emma, I don't think it was just because of who you are. I think it's because of who he is. Emma's mind raced. Who could this man be? Why would anyone be afraid of him, and why had the officers reacted the way they did? She tried to remember every detail from the encounter, every word, every movement, but it all felt like a blur. She remembered the man's voice, calm yet commanding. She remembered the fear in the officers' eyes when they saw him. But most of all, she remembered the words he had spoken, someone you don't want to cross. What did that mean? And why had he intervened on her behalf? It didn't add up. Emma was no one special. She wasn't involved in any criminal activity, wasn't connected to any high-profile events. She was just a regular girl working a late shift at a diner. Unless her father's past was coming for her now. Do you think he's dangerous? Emma asked quietly, her voice trembling slightly. Do you think this guy wants something from me? Noah didn't answer right away. He seemed lost in thought, his eyes narrowing as if piecing together something from the puzzle he hadn't fully understood himself. After a long moment, he spoke. I don't know. But I do know one thing, this isn't over. Whoever that man is, whatever he's involved in, it's connected to Dad's past. And if he's involved, then we're involved too. We don't have a choice anymore. Emma's heart dropped. Involved? Her life had just been a normal, quiet one, until now. Now, she was being dragged into something she couldn't possibly comprehend. Then what do we do? She asked, the words almost a whisper. Noah stood up, pacing the room as if trying to think through their options. We have to find out more about this guy. We have to figure out who he is and why he came for you. And we need to understand why the police were so scared of him. If we don't, then I'm afraid whatever happened tonight is just the beginning. A chill ran through Emma's body. She didn't want to get involved in something so dangerous, but she had no choice. It was already too late. Whoever this man was, whatever ties he had to her father, it was clear. He was not going to let her go. She was already too deep in this world that she had never known. What do you think Dad's involved in? She asked, her voice barely audible. Noah paused. He looked at her, his face conflicted, as if he were weighing the burden of the truth. He knew he couldn't keep her in the dark anymore, but telling her everything would mean opening a door that could never be closed. I don't know the full story, he said finally, his voice low. But I know that Dad was part of something big. Something that could shake the world. And I think whatever that man is doing, whatever he represents, has something to do with that. Emma stood up, her mind racing with questions. Something big? What did that mean? What had her father done? And why was this man still hunting them, after all these years? I don't know if I can handle this, she whispered. I don't know if I can handle whatever this is. You don't have a choice, Noah replied gently. But we're in this together. And we'll figure it out. We'll get through it. His words were meant to reassure her, but they didn't ease the gnawing fear in her stomach. She had no idea what was happening, no idea how deep this rabbit hole went. But one thing was clear, her life had been irrevocably changed, and there was no going back. The next morning, Emma woke up with a sense of dread heavy in her chest. She had barely slept, her mind replaying the events of the previous night over and over. It felt like her world had been turned upside down. But what could she do? She couldn't just pretend that nothing had happened. Noah had been up before her, as he usually was. He was always the early riser, always ready to take on the day. But today, he seemed more anxious than usual, his eyes darting around the apartment like he was waiting for something. "Good morning," she said softly, walking into the kitchen where Noah was already making coffee. "Morning," he replied, not meeting her gaze. He was focused on the coffee maker, but Emma could tell he was preoccupied. "So, what now?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. She didn't want to sound as nervous as she felt, but it was impossible to hide the anxiety building inside her. Noah sighed and set the coffee cup down on the counter. "We need to find out more about this man. We need to figure out who he is, what he wants, and why the police are so afraid of him. I don't think it's just about Dad's past. I think it's about something bigger. Something we're not seeing yet." Emma nodded slowly. "Okay. But how do we even start?" Noah paused, his brow furrowing. "I'm not sure. But I know one thing, we can't do it alone. We need help. And I think I know who to ask." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Who?" Noah gave her a grim smile. "Someone who knows more about the people Dad used to work with. Someone who can help us navigate this world we're in now." The world outside Emma's apartment seemed to be moving at its usual pace, as if nothing had changed. But for Emma and Noah, everything had shifted irrevocably. Each step they took felt heavier, as if the weight of the unknown was pressing down on them from every angle. Her father's mysterious past, the appearance of the enigmatic man, and the unexplained fear the officers had shown, it was all tangled together in a knot that was impossible to untangle. But one thing was certain, they were in over their heads. Emma sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in her hands, but her mind wasn't on the warmth of the drink or the stillness of the morning. Her thoughts were a whirlwind, churning over the questions she couldn't answer. Who was the man that had intervened with the police? Why had the officers been so terrified of him? And, most importantly, what had her father been involved in all these years? Noah sat across from her, his face a mask of quiet determination. He hadn't slept much either, his mind clearly occupied with the same burning questions. As much as Emma wanted to push this all aside, to return to the normal life she'd known before, she couldn't. They were too far in now. There was no going back. "So, who do you think can help us?" Emma asked, breaking the silence that had settled between them. Noah had been quiet for a while, his eyes scanning the room as if searching for something, anything, that could point them in the right direction. Finally, he spoke. "There's someone I trust," he said, his voice low and steady. "His name is Ethan. He's been in the military, but not like Dad. He's more connected. He has ties to people who know the kind of work Dad was involved in. If anyone can help us find answers, it's him." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Ethan? How do you know he'll help us? How do we even find him?" Noah leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. "I've known Ethan for years. We used to run some security ops together. He's got his connections, and he's not afraid to get his hands dirty. But you're right to be cautious. Ethan's not the kind of guy who does favors for free." Emma exhaled slowly, processing his words. "I don't like this, Noah. We don't know what we're getting into. What if this guy isn't someone we can trust?" "I get it," Noah replied, his eyes softening. "But we don't have a choice. We can't do this alone. And if we don't act fast, whoever's after us will make their move." We need answers before it's too late. Emma's heart pounded as she thought about everything that had happened, the strange encounter with the police, the cryptic words of the man in the long coat, and now the realization that her father's past was connected to something much bigger than she ever could have imagined. "You're right," she said, her voice quieter now, more resigned. "Let's do it. Let's find Ethan." Hours later, they were driving through the streets of the city, heading toward a part of town Emma had never been to before. The buildings were older, the streets quieter. It was a world away from the bustling downtown where they lived. Noah's grip on the steering wheel was tight, his jaw clenched in concentration. "Where are we going exactly?" Emma asked, her voice tinged with unease. "Ethan's place," Noah replied, his eyes focused on the road ahead. "He doesn't like people knowing where he lives, so we're not going to knock on his door. But he'll be there. He always is." Emma glanced out the window, watching as the scenery shifted around them. The city's vibrancy seemed to fade into the background, replaced by an eerie calm. The feeling in her chest only grew heavier the closer they got to their destination. She didn't know what to expect, but she had a bad feeling about this. Noah pulled into a dimly lit alley and parked the car. He turned to her, his face serious. "Stay close to me. Don't talk unless you have to. And whatever happens, don't make him angry." Emma nodded, though she couldn't shake the anxiety building in her gut. She followed Noah out of the car, walking swiftly down the alley to a door tucked in the back of an old building. Noah knocked twice, paused, then knocked again. A moment later, the door creaked open. A man stood in the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, his face partially hidden by a shadow. His eyes scanned them quickly, assessing them before he stepped aside, motioning for them to enter. "You brought her?" the man asked, his voice low and gravelly. Noah nodded. "She's the one I told you about." The man's gaze shifted to Emma, lingering for a moment longer than she was comfortable with. Then, without another word, he stepped back and let them in. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old leather and tobacco. The room was dimly lit, with military-grade equipment scattered around, guns, bulletproof vests, and various maps and papers pinned to the walls. It looked like a war room, or something out of a spy movie. Ethan shut the door behind them and walked over to a table, grabbing a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. He poured a generous amount into each glass and pushed one toward Noah, then handed the other to Emma. "You're probably going to need this," he said, his tone blunt. Emma hesitated before taking the glass, the weight of the situation pressing down on her even more. "I'm not here to drink," she said, her voice firm. "I'm here to get answers." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Answers? You think I'm going to give you answers just because you showed up at my door? You're in my world now. This isn't some storybook where everyone gets their happily ever after. You've got to earn the truth, kid." Emma clenched her fists, but Noah placed a hand on her shoulder. "We need your help, Ethan. We don't know who else to turn to." Ethan studied them for a long moment, his gaze cold and calculating. Finally, he sighed and sat down on a worn-out chair. "All right. What do you want to know?" Emma exchanged a glance with Noah, her mind racing with questions. "I want to know what happened to my father," she said, her voice steady. "I want to know why he disappeared, why he left us. And I want to know why people are coming after me now." Ethan leaned back, his eyes never leaving her. "You think you're ready for that kind of truth?" he asked, his voice low. Emma didn't hesitate. "I have to be. We have no choice." Ethan stood up slowly, his movements deliberate. He walked over to a file cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. He opened it on the table in front of them, revealing pictures of her father, some she had never seen before, along with documents, maps, and reports. "This is your father's file," Ethan said, his voice grim. "The man you think you knew is not the man he really was. He was part of a secret program, Delta Force wasn't even the half of it. He worked for a Black Ops division that handled sensitive assignments. And when he left you and your mother, it wasn't because he wanted to. It was because he had no choice. Emma's heart began to race as she scanned the papers in front of her. What kind of assignments? What did he do? Ethan's expression darkened. He was involved in operations that dealt with the most dangerous threats to national security. But there were people in that world, powerful people, who didn't want certain things to come to light. They knew what your father could do, what he was capable of. And when he tried to leave, they made sure he couldn't. They made sure he disappeared. Emma felt the blood drain from her face. You mean he was forced to leave us? Ethan nodded. It wasn't his choice. Your father didn't just walk away from you. He was kept in that world. And now, after all these years, the people he crossed, they've found you. Emma's stomach twisted. The people he crossed. Why would they come after me, she whispered. Why now? Ethan's eyes were cold. Because you're the only thing your father has left. And they're using you to get to him. The room felt colder than before, as if the shadows themselves had deepened in response to the revelations Ethan had just dropped on them. The file before them was thick, the papers inside brimming with facts, photographs, and documents that spoke of a world Emma had never known, a world that her father had been deeply entangled in, and now, it seemed, it was coming for her. Ethan's words echoed in her mind, they're using you to get to him. She stared at the file in front of her, unable to look away from the face of the man she had once called father. The pictures in front of her were not the smiling, loving images she remembered. These were stark, cold photographs of a man in tactical gear, standing alongside other men and women whose faces were blurred for anonymity. The captions below spoke of covert operations, top-secret missions, and classified government work. Noah leaned over, his eyes narrowing, as he scanned the files as well. His face was grim, and Emma could feel the weight of the situation settling on him too. This wasn't just about her father anymore. This was about their lives now, about the people who had been after her father, the people who would stop at nothing to ensure that Emma stayed in the dark. And now, it seemed, they were after her. Do you know who these people are? Noah asked Ethan, his voice tinged with anger and disbelief. Ethan nodded slowly. He didn't seem surprised by Noah's question. Instead, he leaned back against the wall, crossing his arms as he took a slow breath. They go by many names, he said, his voice low and steady. But the most dangerous group is a covert organization known as the Red Tide. They've been around for years, pulling strings behind the scenes, manipulating governments, and controlling global conflicts. They have ties to the highest levels of power in both the military and intelligence communities, but they keep their operations secret. Your father, he was one of the few people who dared to cross them. And for that, they'll stop at nothing to make sure you don't uncover their secrets. Emma's stomach twisted with fear. Red Tide, the name alone was enough to send a chill down her spine. She had never heard of them before, but everything Ethan was saying sounded like something out of a spy thriller. She had always thought her father was just a soldier, a man who had gone off to do his duty, and then come home, trying to live a normal life. But now, she was hearing about a shadowy group that had been operating in the dark for decades, and her father had been caught in their web. So, they've been hunting him all these years? Emma asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan's face tightened. Yes. And now that he's out of the picture, they've set their sights on you. You're the only connection they have left to him, Emma. And if they can't get to him, they'll use you to get to whatever it is he's hiding. Emma could feel the blood drain from her face. She had never been part of this world, never known the danger her father had faced until now. Her whole life, she had lived under the illusion of normalcy, of safety. And now it was all falling apart in a matter of hours. Noah's voice broke the silence. What is it that he's hiding, Ethan? What's so important that they'll go to these lengths to find him? Ethan sighed and stood up, moving toward the wall where a map of the world was pinned. He ran his finger over it, tracing a line that ran across continents, stopping at various points where red pins marked key locations. "This is what we're dealing with," he said, his voice low. "These pins mark the locations of the operations your father was involved in. But the Red Tide didn't just use him for covert missions. They were after something bigger. Your father was part of a task force that was investigating a dangerous group of rogue scientists, a network that had developed weapons far beyond anything most governments could imagine. But your father was one of the few people who knew about it. He was tracking down these scientists, trying to uncover their operations. And what he discovered, well, it was too much. He learned about a weapon that could change the balance of power in the world. And that's when he became a target." Emma's mind raced. A weapon? A weapon that could change the world? "Why didn't he tell us?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Why didn't he come back?" Ethan turned to face her, his expression serious. "Because he couldn't. The Red Tide made sure of that. They were after him, after his knowledge. They wanted him to either join them or stay out of their way. Your father chose the latter. He tried to disappear, but they don't let people go. They have resources everywhere, and no matter how far he ran, they would always find him." Emma could feel the tears welling in her eyes. Her father had been running for years, hiding the truth from her, from Noah. And now, because of that, she was a part of this game of cat and mouse with an enemy she couldn't even see. "What happens now?" she whispered. "What do we do?" Ethan gave her a grim look. "We find out everything we can about this weapon your father was tracking. We find out where it is, who has it, and what they intend to do with it. And we have to stay ahead of the Red Tide, because if we don't, they'll come for you. And they won't stop until they get what they want." Emma's heart pounded in her chest. Stay ahead of them? How? She had no experience in this world of shadows and deception. She was just a girl, trying to live a normal life. But now, her life was anything but normal. "We don't have much time," Ethan continued. "The Red Tide doesn't operate like other organizations. They'll strike quickly and without warning. The moment they think you know too much, they'll make their move. You've already seen how ruthless they can be. The police who tried to stop you, one of them was likely compromised. The other was just scared of what he knew." Emma's mind flashed back to that night, the way the officers had reacted when they saw the mysterious man. They had known something terrifying. And Emma had been caught in the middle of it. "So, what now?" Noah asked, his voice steady but full of resolve. "How do we fight back?" Ethan's eyes flicked to the map again, his fingers tracing another line across the continents. "We go after them. We find the people who know about the weapon, and we take the fight to them. We have to be strategic. This isn't a war that can be won with brute force. We need to outsmart them." Emma nodded slowly, trying to process everything Ethan had said. There was no going back now. Her life had been turned upside down, and it seemed there was only one path ahead, a dangerous one, filled with uncertainty and shadows. But she couldn't turn back. She had to see this through, for her father, for herself, and for Noah. "So, what's our first move?" Emma asked, her voice stronger now, despite the fear churning inside her. Ethan looked at her with a cold, calculating gaze. "First, we need to get more information. We need to know exactly where the weapon is, who's holding it, and who can help us get it. And I know just the place to start." Hours later, Emma, Noah, and Ethan were on the move. Ethan had arranged for them to meet a former ally, someone who had worked with her father years ago. This person, a man named Victor, was someone Emma knew only by name. Her father had mentioned him a few times when she was younger, but she had never been told much about their relationship. As they drove through the city, Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of dread growing inside her. She wasn't sure what they were walking into, but everything about this felt wrong. The red tide was a force beyond anything she could imagine, and she was now caught in their web. Noah sat beside her, his face grim but resolute. He reached over and squeezed her hand, a silent gesture of reassurance. They didn't know what was ahead, but they were in this together. And they would fight to the end. The car pulled up to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The windows were dark, the building looking as though it hadn't been used in years. Ethan led them inside, his footsteps echoing through the empty space. As they stepped deeper into the shadows of the warehouse, Emma felt a growing sense of unease. She had no idea who Victor was or what he knew, but if he had the answers they were looking for, this meeting could be the most important one of their lives. The door creaked open, and a man stepped into view, tall, with a hardened face, and eyes that held a lifetime of secrets. "Victor?" Ethan asked, his voice low. Victor nodded once, his gaze flicking over to Emma and Noah. "So, these are the kids," he said, his voice gruff. "I heard you were in town." Ethan gave a terse nod. "We need your help." Victor glanced at Emma, his expression unreadable. "You're her, then?" "The daughter." Emma met his gaze, trying to steady herself. This man had answers, and she needed them. "Tell me what you know," she said, her voice firm. Victor paused for a long moment before he spoke. "What I know could get you killed. But if you're ready for the truth, I'll give it to you." The air inside the abandoned warehouse was thick with dust and the scent of decay. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows across the grimy floor. Ethan led the way, his steps deliberate and measured, while Emma and Noah followed closely behind, their nerves fraying with every echoing footstep. Victor stood in front of them, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He was tall, with a steely gaze that seemed to pierce through everything. His face was lined with age and experience, and there was a coldness to him that made Emma uneasy. He had been an ally of her father, or at least that's what Ethan had said, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this man than met the eye. "So, you're the daughter," Victor said, his voice deep and gravelly. He didn't make it sound like a question, more like a statement he had already known. Emma stood tall, forcing herself to maintain composure. "That's right," she replied. "And I need to know everything about what happened to my father. I need to know who these people are that are after me and why they want me." Victor's eyes flicked toward Noah for a brief moment before returning to Emma. "You're playing a dangerous game, girl," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "If you want to survive this, you better understand what you're up against." Emma's throat tightened. She had come this far, and she wasn't backing down now. "I know. That's why I'm here." Victor let out a short chuckle, but there was no humor in it. "You think you're ready for the truth? The Red Tide isn't just any group. They don't care about right or wrong. They care about control. And they'll do whatever it takes to keep it. Your father understood that. That's why he tried to stay out of it. But when you know what they're capable of, when you see the power they wield, there's no turning back." Emma's heart beat faster. The Red Tide had already taken so much from her. They had already claimed her father, and now they were coming for her. But what was the truth behind them? Why had they chosen her father as a target? "I don't care about the past. I need to know where they are now and what they want from me," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "I need to know what's happening." Victor paused, his gaze flicking to the walls around them as though considering whether or not to speak. "All right. I'll tell you what you need to know. But understand this, the moment you step into this world, there's no going back. You're marked. They won't stop until they get what they want, and they'll use anyone to do it." Ethan stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "Victor, just tell her. She deserves to know." Victor gave a slight nod, his face darkening. Fine. Your father was involved in something much bigger than just military ops. The Red Tide isn't just a rogue group. It's a global network that deals in weapons of mass destruction, biological warfare, and destabilizing world governments. Your father was part of a special unit that infiltrated them, trying to gather intelligence on their operations. But he wasn't just a spy. He discovered something. The Red Tide was working on developing a weapon, something so powerful it could change the course of history. Emma's breath caught in her throat. A weapon? What kind of weapon? Victor took a deep breath, as though the very idea of it pained him. The Red Tide was working on a biological agent. A virus. One that could be weaponized and spread on a massive scale. And it wasn't just any virus, it was designed to target specific genetic traits, targeting entire populations and eliminating them with frightening precision. Your father was on the trail of this weapon. He knew what they were planning, and he was getting closer to exposing them when they found out. They decided to silence him. Not just him, but anyone who knew too much. Noah's face paled. And they're coming after Emma because she's the last connection to him, aren't they? Victor nodded grimly. Exactly. Your father knew too much, and now they want to make sure no one can use that knowledge against them. They're after Emma, but they'll use anything, anyone, to get to her. You're both in their sights now. Emma felt a chill run down her spine. A biological weapon. The Red Tide had been developing a virus, something that could wipe out entire populations, and her father had been trying to stop them. But he had failed. And now, they were using her as leverage. She had always thought that her life was ordinary, but the truth was, it had always been part of something much larger than she could have ever imagined. So what do we do now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. How do we stop them? Victor turned to face her, his eyes piercing. Stopping them isn't easy. They have resources everywhere. Governments, militaries, organizations, they control them all. And even if we get our hands on the weapon, it's not just a matter of destroying it. The Red Tide is global. They've got their fingers in every pie, and if you start poking at them, they'll retaliate. Hard. Then we have to do something, Noah said, his voice firm. We can't just sit back and wait to be caught. Victor hesitated, then walked over to a large filing cabinet in the corner of the room. He rummaged through it for a moment before pulling out a folder, thick with papers. He handed it to Emma, his gaze steady. Here's where we start, he said. This is everything your father gathered before he disappeared. There's a list of the locations where Red Tide operatives have been spotted. This includes known safe houses, underground labs, and some of their key players. But the real target is the facility in Kazakhstan. That's where they're keeping the weapon, the virus. And that's where we need to go if we want to stop them. Emma opened the folder, her hands trembling. Inside were maps, photographs, and intelligence reports, names of people who had worked with her father, locations that had been compromised, and details on the virus. But her eyes were drawn to the map of Kazakhstan. There was a red circle around one location, with a note written beside it, Containment Facility, Bioagent Development Site. It was real. The weapon was real. And it was only a matter of time before the Red Tide unleashed it. We need to move fast. Ethan said, his voice low and urgent. If the Red Tide finds out we're onto them, they'll burn everything down to cover their tracks. Emma glanced up at him, then back at the folder. She felt a fire ignite inside her, a sense of urgency and purpose that she hadn't felt before. They were the ones standing in the way of a global catastrophe. Noah placed his hand on her shoulder. We're not backing down. We're going to stop them. Victor looked at them both, a hint of respect in his eyes. I hope you're ready for what's coming. The Red Tide isn't just a group of terrorists. They're an entire network, and if they find out you're onto them, they won't hesitate to kill anyone in their path." Emma's heart pounded. She had always thought her life would be ordinary, nothing more than a simple existence, a job, a family. But now, it was a fight for survival, a fight against an enemy that was as elusive and dangerous as any force she could imagine. "So, what's the plan?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear she was feeling. Victor didn't hesitate. "We infiltrate. We get to the facility in Kazakhstan, we gather intel, and we destroy the virus. We're going to need a team, but I have connections that can help. We'll need to move fast, and we need to stay off the radar. This isn't going to be easy, but it's the only way." Emma took a deep breath, steeling herself. She had no choice. This was her fight now. She had to stop the red tide, for her father, for herself, and for the future of everyone else.